This week we explore one of Kenya's veteran journalists,
I did not have a passion for writing.
Margaretta Wa Gacheru.
We spent a lot of time in art galleries and museums. The Nairobi Times was supposed to be a cross between New York Times and the Observer of London and be business.
She recounts how journalism was back in the late President Moi's era and how she built a team for the First Party paper.
Nyayo decided that was a good idea, and he bought us. I went to State House with the whole entourage in my office. We went and, we bowed down to the president.
And what about Gacheru?
He was my classmate.
Oh, wow.
At university. And he and I were both very political. We read, do I dare say, well, we read some books together, and we were in a study group, and we were very political. Hello, I am Margaretta Wa Gacheru. I am a journalist at Nation Media, and this is the Boss Lady.
Margaretta Wa Gacheru comes from a family of educators and educated people. She had siblings who went to Ivy League schools, and she knew from early on that she would follow the path, and not so long after this realization, she visited Princeton and Harvard when she was 7 years old. She went to public schools. Her secondary school was Evanston Township High School in Illinois, just outside Chicago, which had over 1,000 graduating students of all races: whites, blacks, Jews, Latinos, and Koreans. Margaretta was not interested in journalism, she attests, although her mother had briefly worked for the biggest newspaper in Chicago, the Chicago Tribune, before she got married. At the university is when she started her writing career, writing for the school newspaper. While doing her master's in education, she got a Rotary Ambassadorial Fellowship to come to Kenya for a master's degree in literature. Before she completed her master's, she got a job with Hilary Ngweno as he was starting a brand new Sunday paper called the Nairobi Times. She was assigned to write about Kenyan arts and culture, and that is what she has been doing ever since. Let's take a look at the history of journalism in the country. Between the 70s and the 80s, the Kenyan media history was vibrant, marked by the arrival of many iconic publications. The Weekly, which was Kenya's longest-running political publication, had a reputation for strong analytical and investigative journalism. It was sold widely in many parts of Africa. The Financial Review and the Economic Review were also established in 1982, contributing to the growth of business journalism in Kenya. The 80s proved to be a difficult time for Kenyan media, following a coup attempt leading to severe restrictions. This atmosphere saw the emergence of an alternative media to fill the void. As a result, many publications including Beyond Magazine, the Financial Review, the Nairobi Law Monthly, and Development Agenda were banned in the late 1980s as the clamor for a multi-party political system gathered pace in 1992. Between the late 1980s and the early 1990s, the media continued to reflect the social-political agenda of the day, which mainly centered on the push to introduce multi-party politics. The Kenya Times was an English-language newspaper published in Kenya from 1983 to 2010. It was first published on the 5th of April 1983 and was founded by KANU, at the time the only legal political party in Kenya. The paper was originally known as the Nairobi Times. In 1988, Robert Maxwell, who also published The Mirror, bought a 45% stake in the paper. The remaining ownership was still held by KANU. The paper was subsequently rebranded and it became the first full-color newspaper in Kenya. It also launched a Swahili language sister paper, that's Kenya Leo. Kenya Times briefly overtook the Standard as the second most popular newspaper in Kenya, of course after Daily Nation, but its popularity waned after 1992's general elections, the first multi-party elections in Kenya since the abolition of one-party system. Kenya Times stopped publication in early June 2010 due to financial problems. We will get to hear from Margaretta during her time in Kenya Times, but first, here are some things you need to know about her. If you're an artist, then you probably know who this woman is. Either you have seen her articles on the Business Daily or in artistic events or gatherings, but wonder how did she get here?
I got a fellowship with Rotary International. It was called an ambassadorial fellowship, and I had to apply for it. And at the time, there were very few women who were getting this scholarship. Rotary was still a man's club, but I applied. I had the interview with 9 white men, and they approved me. So I came. I didn't really know much about Kenya at the time, but I learned quickly, and I came straight to University of Nairobi, and I realized that I wanted to be in the literature department with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, but I had finished my first degree in sociology, my second degree in education, so I was like, where will I go next? Because I had the money and I had the opening. So Ngugi rejected me because he said, you are a sociology student, you did not study literature undergraduate. So I went back and I took 3 years in 1 year and took all the exams and got into...
In 1 year?
Yes.
Expound.
At University of Nairobi, in literature, with John Uganda and Ngugi, and Okot Pibitek was there, and Taban Leong and Chris Wanjala, and all these amazing people. It was a big privilege. And then I got into the master's program. Finally, I ran out of money.
Finally, you ran out of money.
Yes. I stretched it. And the Rotarians were wonderful. They gave me a picky and a place to stay. And I had to work, so I got a job.
So you got a job, but where was the first place you worked while you were in this country?
I worked for a newspaper called Target.
Okay.
It was with the National Christian Council of Kenya. I was hired to be a woman's editor. I was hired because I was harassed. I was so annoyed that African men would not appreciate that women could be friends, as in not sexual friends, mutual interests, whatever. So I started writing stories about my complaints because I knew a lot of people on campus, and some of them did not want to know me here. They just wanted to, know me elsewhere, and I wasn't interested. So that's when they said, we really like your stories, we'd like you to work for us. So I got a job, and then I was called by the editor who had moved to work with Hillary Ngueno, and they called me, and then I got a job with Weekly Review and a brand new newspaper called the Nairobi Times.
So what prompted her to move into arts?
It's complicated because, of course, I love to write, and I loved to read and write about what I read, and that was what being a graduate student was. So that was exciting, but it was really out of my own need to express myself and my rage, really. It was something that was deeper that got me going, that I had to feel. So I think the best way to write is to really write about what you care about. And I mean, fortunately, I was hired to write about the arts. Hillary Ngueno said, I want you to write about all the arts from a Kenyan perspective, even though I'm not a Kenyan. So that meant having to go out and find the Kenyan artists.
But how did she start?
So, I was hired because at the time he wanted somebody who was in a master's program, who was in the literature department. So it was obvious that I could write because I'd gotten into the department. So it was sort of de facto. I ended up doing it because I could do it and I had to do it. And also, what I did do was journals, like most people do. I started writing my inner thoughts long before that, but those were private. Yeah.
Journals. Everybody writes journals, right? Okay, maybe just me. As we walk across her newsroom, she recounts to me her times during the Moi Era, and of course, I cannot deny you that.
Getting hired by Hillary Ngueno, who, I've taught journalism at Kenya Methodist University, and it shocks me that students don't know who he is, Hillary Ngueno. He's the grandfather of Kenya journalism. He's the first Kenyan editor of Nation Media, of editor-in-chief, and he's still alive. He's in his 80s, but it was a big honor to be hired by him. So the problem, I think, is that Hillary wasn't a businessman, and so he had very high hopes for his newspaper. Nairobi Times was supposed to be a cross between New York Times and the Observer of London and be business. And he hired me to write about the arts. So when he didn't have enough money to pay the bills, he went to Nyayo, may he rest in peace, President Moi, and told him he needed a party paper. So Nyayo decided that was a good idea, and he bought us. He bought us, all of us, to go. And so, I went to State House with the whole entourage in my office. We went, and, we bowed down to the president. There was one other fellow from Australia who came and went, but I was the only little Mzungu lady. Having Wa Gacheru was nice because most people some people weep when they meet Margaretta because they believe I'm a Kenyan, an African. And I say, sorry, can't help it. But Moi was okay.
He was okay?
And then we had the International Women's Conference in Nairobi, 1985. And that was when Angela Davis and all sorts of global feminists showed up in Nairobi. And from 1984, the government realized that they knew nothing about something called gender. So they started having workshops all over in all departments to wake people up to what this meant. So I attended all of those and wrote about all of them. And then the conference came, and it was after the conference that Mary Okello called me, and she is the founder of the Kenya Women Finance Trust, not the lady that's there now. She came after and she's doing a wonderful job, but she didn't found it. So Mary Okello founded it because she was Kenya's first woman banker, and she had her own struggles to let those white men give her a job. She's wonderful. She's amazing. And so she came and called me and asked me to work for her because Women's World, she was now going to be the regional coordinator for all of Africa, to start setting up affiliates like Kenya Women in other countries. And so I would be writing about her journey. So I agreed. And before that, I had actually worked for a short time with UNESCO, but really didn't like that because I was no longer among Kenyans. And also, I found that people didn't want me to talk about what they were doing because it wasn't straight. So I came back to Nairobi Kenya Times. But then when Mary Okello calls me, I said, you know, she wanted Kenya Times, Women's World Banking is all about assisting women. And it was one of the pioneering microcredit.
Yeah, and it gives someone great value, like you feel like
you're doing something. Yeah. So I wrote with her for like 5 years, and when the New York office closed our office, I became Mary Okello's personal assistant for a year, and then started writing for Nation.
Yes, currently she's still with Nation Media Group under the business Daily Wing. I'm sure though by now you're wondering who this Gacheru is. We talk about that and much more next on The Boss Lady.